Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Peace be upon you and welcome to the News in Brief. Ahmed Kuria arrived unannounced in Cairo to discuss the dangerous situation in the Palestinian territories with Egyptian leaders. 2 Palestinians were martyred in the Gaza Strip, bringing the number of those killed to 13, and 70 others were wounded during Israeli air raids in the region. The Palestinian president denounces the Israeli raids, calling for the leaders of the world to intervene to prevent Israel from increasing its raids. Israel confirms that it will pursue Palestinian activists, increasing its deployments in the Palestinian territories and arresting 17 Palestinians. The International Atomic Energy Agency says that Iran's agreement to its demands is encouraging, but it still needs to report information to the United Nations. Tehran signed an additional protocol for surprise inspections, providing information about its nuclear facilities and suspending its uranium enrichment program. The U.S. forces arrest 21 Iraqi members of Muqtada Sadr's group. Meanwhile, there was an explosion and a fire at an oil pipeline near Biji, the largest oil refinery in Iraq. Fingers are being pointed at loyalists of Saddam Hussein's previous regime. The U.S. forces fire into the air to disperse thousands of Iraqis gathered in front of the Ministry of Oil, protesting the harm caused by U.S. soldiers, their treatment of the Iraqis, and the use of dogs during raid operations. Saudi Arabia arrests several people accusing them of being terrorists, discovering a large stash of weapons and drugs in Riyadh and Jeddah. Powell arrives in Kenya for peace negotiations between the Sudanese government and the South, saying that both sides have suffered too long and Washington will not lose an opportunity to end Sudan's 20-year-old civil war. This is the end of the News in Brief. Peace be upon you and welcome to the news. After negotiations and international pressure, Iran agrees to sign the additional protocol concerning its nuclear program. In addition, Tehran promises full cooperation and transparency in regards to its nuclear program. In Iran's concluding statements after their negotiations with the German, French, and British foreign ministers, they said that they suspended their uranium enrichment programs in response to the European demand. Meanwhile, the 3 ministers commended this agreement, saying that it is a very important step. In response to this agreement, the White House commented, saying that it is a positive step as long as they adhere to it. The director of the Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammad al-Baradei, said that the agency is still waiting for Iran's declaration of its previous activities and an official notice stating that they will sign the additional protocol.
The British, French, and German foreign ministers' statement in Iran is a historical and an important one, paving the way to solving the current nuclear crisis that is worrying the world, fearing the same fate for Iran as in Iraq.
In respect to the signature of the additional protocol, this requires full cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, with full transparency and complying with the demands. This issue will be dealt with. We discussed the issue with the Iranian government and agree that they have the right for civil nuclear programs.
This agreement took place after long and difficult negotiations with the Secretary General of Iran's National Security Council, Hassan Rouhani. Iran believes that this is an important achievement that will avoid problems during the coming phase. The three European countries also feel that this step will change the current situation, especially concerning the never-ending conflict between the United States and Iran. Iran agreed to the official demands of full cooperation and transparency with the International Atomic Energy Agency and to signing and immediately implementing the additional protocol, also agreeing to voluntarily halt its uranium enrichment program.
Iran and Europe are entering a new stage, thus the need for steps to reinforce the trust between them. We agreed to suspend the uranium enrichment program temporarily as a sign of good faith and in order to solve this crisis.
Iranian President Mohammad Khatami backed this agreement, which honors Iran and forces the Europeans to respect Iran's sovereignty, independence, national security, and national interest. In the meantime, this will deter the threat of war in the region, reinforcing security and stability in this vital area, as stated by the British Foreign Minister, even if Israel is inciting for a new war in the region. In return for Iran's agreement, the French, British, and German foreign ministers promised to support Iran's civil nuclear program and provided guarantees. However, can Iran depend on the European document if there are new U.S. pressures? Reporting from Abu Dhabi TV, Najah Muhammad Ali, Tehran.
The Israeli occupation forces were redeployed in the Palestinian refugee camps in northern Rafah, leaving behind horrifying images of destruction and devastation.
The Israeli incursions and raids continue in Rafah as Israeli bulldozers are destroying Palestinian homes on a large scale. During a recent incursion, the Israeli forces demolished more than 20 homes while people's belongings were still inside. The sewage leaked into the water system when Israeli bulldozers destroyed a network of pipes, in addition to destroying electric and telephone lines, as well as road systems. Palestinians perceive these acts of destruction as state-sponsored terrorism.
Who are the terrorists? We or the Israelis and Americans? They claim they are fighting terrorism. We are not terrorists. Look, our homes were here. Some were demolished while people were still inside. They destroyed our homes and every living thing. They even destroyed the trees. They claim they want peace, but they bulldozed olive trees, the symbol of peace. They also destroyed the sewage system, phone and electric lines. For more than 2 weeks, we haven't had electricity, water, or food.
They say that the Palestinians are terrorists. They are the terrorists, not the Palestinians. I have no one to turn to but God.
People in refugee camps are in a state of shock. They only have God. They have no one to turn to, including humanitarian organizations. When Israeli bulldozers destroy their homes and property, they have no one to turn to but God. Amid the absence of a political solution, Israel is taking advantage of the vulnerability of the Palestinians. For now, no power is willing to stop this monstrous machine of destruction from demolishing Palestinian homes and terrorizing their children.
They destroyed our home. My books are under the rubble. Everything is under the rubble. The swing was destroyed. The trees were destroyed. Homes were demolished. At night, the soldiers come in a car and they keep on shooting. It was dark and we started screaming.
These actions only make Palestinians more determined to resist occupation and hold on to their rights and land, regardless of the Israeli brutality.
So what? They destroy the walls of our homes, we will build new ones. They destroy the trees, we will grow new ones. We will build another swing. We will sing and celebrate once again. Sharon, do whatever you want. Even if you destroy our homes, we will always stay here.
The Israeli occupation forces claim that they have withdrawn from their refugee camps, but the camera of Al Alam television shows that the Israeli tanks are redeploying in the northern parts of these camps. People here are saying that they are regrouping to launch another attack on them. The destruction left behind seems as if an earthquake or volcano devastated the area. However, the devastation was actually caused by Israeli tanks and bulldozers. Mustafa Abdel Hadi, Al Alam Channel, from Al Brazil neighborhood in Rafah, Palestine.
At least one Palestinian citizen was killed and 18 others were injured in the ongoing operation of the Israeli occupation army in Ramallah and El-Biri areas in the West Bank, whereas 40 Israeli army jeeps and armored trucks entered the center of the West Bank city of Ramallah on Tuesday evening, Palestinian security sources and witnesses said. They entered from the north shortly after 6:30 p.m. local time, imposing curfew on the center on the city and surrounded the landmark Abd al-Nasser Mosque, the witnesses added. People inside the mosque were being told to leave in groups of 4 and present their identity papers to the soldiers. Medical sources said 5 people had been slightly injured after the Israelis opened fire with rubber-coated bullets. Arab League chief Amr Moussa said Tuesday it was absurd to speak of peace as long as Israel kept building a barrier through parts of the Palestinian West Bank. To say that Israel accepts the roadmap is not credible at a time when it waged a total military war against the Palestinians, Moussa told reporters after Arab League ambassadors met on behalf of the Palestinians. The ambassadors studied what the Arab group and the United Nations in New York could do after the United States last week vetoed a draft resolution condemning Israel's security barrier, League officials said. Israeli occupation bulldozers raised up 200 dunams of the Palestinian-owned land of the Sawahir al-Sharqiyya in occupied East Jerusalem and uprooted approximately 500 olive trees. A contingent of 50 Israeli occupation soldiers backed by 10 tanks and jeeps raided Beit Kahel town northwest of Hebron city and besieged it before carrying out house-to-house search, arresting 7 citizens. 2 citizens were arrested by Israeli occupation forces in Tulkarem city in the West Bank. The occupation soldiers also have beaten the citizen Walid Qassas under the pretext that his son has not been at home. Israeli occupation forces sealed off Salah ad-Din main road linking Gaza Strip north with the south, witnesses said. Palestine's permanent representative to the Arab League, Mohammed Sabih, asserted in the permanent representatives meeting in Cairo that Sharon's government sealed off all roads for peace, as well as foiling all chances to restore calm and heading for negotiations. Sabih said the situation is miserable, threatening of health and environmental catastrophe, where the Palestinian cities face a strict siege preventing foodstuff and medicine to enter the areas, in addition to Israeli establishment of the racial separation wall, paying no attention to the international norms and legitimacy. Meanwhile, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has warned that Middle East peace is more distant than ever, denouncing Israel's racist policy against Palestinian people and Arabs. Speaking before a dinner meeting with visiting Spanish King Juan Carlos and Queen Sofia on Monday, Assad stressed that his country sought a just and global peace in the region based on United Nations resolution stipulating Israeli withdrawal from the occupied territories. On the other hand, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana condemned Tuesday a series of Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip that left at least 12 people dead. I am concerned at the military action in Gaza and strongly deplore that it led to several civilians being killed and many more injured, he said in a statement. Adding military actions of the type led in the Gaza Strip Monday not only bring added suffering to populations, they also contribute to increasing tension and putting at risk security in the region. In the meantime, Secretary of Palestinian-Israeli Dialogue Committee Latif Duri denounced Sharon's government aggression against the Palestinians. In a communique issued Tuesday, Duri said that Israeli arrogant air raids are considered as another series of massacres which committed by Sharon from Jenin to Rafah. Duri called on the international corps, on top of which the United Nations, to intervene immediately to condemn and stop Israeli airstrikes against unarmed Palestinians, as well as sending international observers to observe the oppressive measures on the ground in Gaza and the West Bank. On the other hand, Roman Catholic Patriarch of Antakya and the whole East, Gregorius III Laham, condemned Israeli government's stance and racial practices against unarmed Palestinians, destroying all hopes of achieving peace in the region. Patriarch Laham said that the United States policy increased tension in the area, particularly in Palestine.
Occupation soldiers fired above the heads of thousands of Iraqi government workers protesting the use of dogs by the GIs to conduct security searches. The protest was ignited when U.S. soldiers detained a woman, an engineer at the oil ministry, who refused to undergo a sniffer dog search, saying that she was carrying the Quran in her handbag. Protesters said U.S. troops had handcuffed a woman employee and forced her to stand in the sun for an hour. U.S. soldiers also confiscated camera gear of an Arab TV network which was filming the protest. A U.S. occupation foot patrol came under bombs and a small arms attack Monday in the flashpoint town of Fallujah, where the U.S. military command admitted one of its soldiers were killed and 5 others were injured. Iraqi police and witnesses said there were 4 soldiers killed after a backup force arrived at the scene that later turned into a battlefield. Occupation forces opened their random fire in vain while pursuing the attackers into a populated neighborhood. However, their bullets hit bystanders and passers-by, killing 2 civilians, including a Syrian nationalist in his truck, and injuring many other civilians. U.S. Military Chief of Staff Richard Myers said that his forces could stay in Iraq all through next year and signaled that they might as well stay until the year 2005. A top U.S. military commander in Baghdad confirmed, meanwhile, that the occupation was planning to move American forces from bases inside the capital to the city's outskirts. The first U.S. bases would be moved out of the city in February, with the process completed by April, as the 1st Armored Division is rotated out of Iraq. Meanwhile, Iraq's interim government expressed high hopes that a donors gathering in Madrid this week would contribute money to the help of the war-racked country. According to Iraq's interim trade minister Ali Alawi, Iraq expects to raise $23 to $24 billion, which is about 40% of the money required for the next 5 years. A large chunk of the money will come from the United States, which has earmarked $20.3 billion, of which are loans, while Japan has pledged $1.5 billion, and other nations are expected to offer another $1.5 billion. U.S. companies have received the lion's share of contracts during the first 6 months of rebuilding Iraq. The first bidding proposals were unveiled last spring by the U.S. Agency for International Development and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the 2 organizations in charge of distributing contracts for priority work. According to an official account published by the USAID, these contracts were primarily awarded to U.S. companies. Construction giant Bechtel received, for example, 10 of them. At the same time, certain offers have been short-circuited given the urgency of the situation, and foreign companies found themselves excluded from the context. An American college student who told authorities he placed box cutters and other banned items aboard 2 airliners to test security was charged on Monday with taking a dangerous weapon aboard an aircraft. Nathaniel Heatwell, aged 20, told federal agents he went through normal security procedures at airports in Baltimore, Maryland, and Raleigh-Durham in North Carolina before hiding the items on board 2 different planes. Although he told then sent an email to federal authorities saying he had placed the items on board, it took authorities nearly 5 weeks to find them. An official from the Homeland Security Committee said the incident illustrated that work was still needed to improve air travel security.
Trying to sidestep a U.S. veto in the UN Security Council, Arab states have urged the General Assembly to adopt a resolution declaring illegal an Israeli defense built on West Bank land. Arab envoys also asked the 191-nation Assembly to approve a second measure seeking an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on whether Israel is legally obligated to dismantle the fence. The Netherlands-based court, a branch of the UN, judges disputes between countries. The U.S., Israel's closest ally, last week vetoed a draft resolution declaring the construction of the Israeli fence a violation of international law that must be ceased and reversed. But the Palestinians enjoy strong support in the Assembly, and Washington has no veto there. And over to international news, Saudi Arabia has arrested several suspected militants and seized large amounts of weapons and explosives, including bomb belts used by suicide bombers. State television showed C4 plastic explosives, homemade pipe bombs, assault rifles and ammunition belonging to what it called terrorist cells, seized in several raids across the country. An Interior Ministry statement read on television said an unspecified number of suspects were arrested during the raids in the capital Riyadh, the city of Jeddah, and 4 other locations. The raids are part of a crackdown by Saudi authorities after suicide bombings in Riyadh in May, which killed 35 people. The United States and Saudi Arabia blamed Al-Qaeda for the attacks. And the Irish Republican Army have said they scrapped part of their illegal arsenal, and Britain called fresh elections in Northern Ireland in a major boost for the province's shaky peace process. The independent monitor overseeing the disarmament process confirmed that the IRA had scrapped light, medium and heavy ordnance. The head of the monitor said the amount was larger than the quantity put beyond use in the previous event last year. The IRA move came as British Prime Minister Tony Blair and Irish counterpart Bertie Ahern arrived in Belfast to seal a deal they hope will be the most significant political event there since the 1998 Good Friday peace agreement. Britain had set November 26 as the date of the long-delayed elections to Northern Ireland's Power-Sharing Assembly, an announcement which triggered the IRA gesture as part of an orchestrated sequence of declarations. And U.S. President George W. Bush has arrived in Singapore on the 4th stop of the Six-Nation Asian Tour, anchored by a regional summit in Thailand. Bush met Singapore Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong for talks that centered on trade and Washington's efforts to get more support for its so-called war on terrorism. Bush took the same message to the summit of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, in Thailand, where security, North Korea, and trade dominated discussions. The APEC forum effectively backed the U.S. stand of providing some security guarantees for North Korea in exchange for proof that it would not seek to develop nuclear weapons. In Indonesia, Bush's next stop, students gathered outside the U.S. Embassy to make sure their opinion of the leader and his recent war decisions are heard. Scores of protesters chanted slogans branding Bush a terrorist and threw tomatoes at the heavily fortified embassy. Bush's 4-hour visit comes at the time when anti-American sentiment in Indonesia is at its highest level in decades over the U.S. invasion of Iraq and Washington's support for Israel. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell has said Washington will not let the Sudanese government and rebels miss a chance to end 20 years of war that has killed 2 million people. He spoke to reporters traveling with him to Kenya at the start of a mission to push the Sudanese peace talks. Powell held out the prospect of a transformation of U.S. ties with Sudan if a peace agreement widely expected this year were concluded. The United States currently lists Sudan as a state sponsor of terrorism for hosting Islamic militants. Powell said there were good prospects for peace between the Sudanese government and the southern rebels, which have been locked in talks in the Kenyan town of Naivasha since October the 15th. Negotiators reached an agreement on security matters last month and are now working on arrangements for sharing political power and the new oil wealth between the regions. After talks with Kenyan leaders, Powell is expected to meet the Khartoum government and the rebel Sudan People's Liberation Army.
In his speech to the Parliament, His Excellency King Mohammed VI stressed that this new legislation will not address women alone, but also the father, mother, children, and family. It will include removing injustices against women, protecting the rights of children, and ensuring the dignity of men. The people in Parliament were greatly pleased by the King's speech on the draft legislation. To our reporter, Surya Farsi.
King Mohammed VI gave a historical speech in the opening of the new parliamentary session. He was introducing the pillars of a new legislation that will affect the lives of women, children, and men, protecting the integrity and income of the family. The women in Parliament expressed their pleasure with these new developments.
His Excellency's speech covered the core reforms that as a women's organization we were asking for. We cannot say that he forgot or ignored any of the changes. We also can't say that the advisory committee formed by His Excellency ignored our requests. The core reforms were represented in his speech. In reality, today women added another achievement in their long list of demands. Thank God, this legislation will offer many benefits for women, the family, and children, in the framework of the sacred religion of Islam and in the scope of our tradition, morals, and principles.
The power of the King Mohammed VI's speech was demonstrated in his presenting of the foundations of the draft civil law, offering new ideas which emphasize that the security of society lies with the solidarity of the family, the protection of women and children's rights, and the dignity of men.
It is an accomplishment for Moroccan women and Moroccan families in general. It shows that we don't only care about women, but about women, children, and men, because the Moroccan family needs them all. This benefits the entire Moroccan society.
ما يمكننا قوله اليوم هو أننا نعيش أجواء العيد ليس فقط بالنسبة للنساء.
What we can say today is that there is an atmosphere of celebration, not only for the women, but for all Moroccan families. We hope that Parliament will approve this family legislation. I hope that the law will be properly implemented.
However, trying to understand the ideas and the concepts that were presented by the King's speech regarding the equality between men and women, polygamy, and the protection of children's rights may prevent the quick implementation of these new laws.
The question remains, how will it be implemented and to what extent? And who is responsible for executing this law? We hope the implementation will be complete to the letter of the law. Otherwise, the results will not be positive. Many things were re-evaluated. The King's speech indicated that this policy will be implemented gradually.
Before the civil legislation draft reached the hands of the King, there were heated discussions in the committee evaluating it. Today, this draft legislation will be presented to the Parliament for adoption, signifying a new milestone in the history of this nation.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.